In this demo, we'll be looking into the div tag. I've got a basic directory set up on my desktop here. I've got a root folder, as you can see here. I've called it root_div_demo. And inside of there, I've already created two folders. So if you're following along, create the same directory structure. Now, one of my folders I've named images, and inside of there, I've already placed two JPEG images that I have made available for you to download. And the other folder, which is still currently empty, is to accommodate my CSS file. So I'm going to put an HTML file in here. I'm just going to use my text editor to create that, and I'll also, after that, demonstrate creating a CSS file to control some of the div tags. Now, quickly speaking, a div tag is basically creating a section on your HTML web page. So you can create little sections, and they can contain any content that you can conceivably put on a web page. So I'm just going to create three very simple div tags to demonstrate how they function before we start applying CSS style sheets to it. So I'm just going to toggle over to my text editor here and create a new file quickly and save it inside of this root folder. So right away I'll just do my save, and you should save immediately before you create any content. And let's just go and find my desktop here. Actually, just go up to here for a second and slide down here. Okay, and my root folder, I've named this one root div demo. So I'm going to go into there, and I'll just call this one div demo, div_demo. And what's most important right now in creating the new file is to add .html to the file name at the end, and save that inside of that folder. Use HTML, yes, .html. And if I move this aside a bit, you can see that it's now sitting inside of that root folder alongside the other two folders. Alright, so I'm going to very quickly knock out some code here. We'll just start with our basic page, HTML tags. And I'll put my closing tag here. Alright, I'm just going to make this a bit bigger. There we go. And I'll put in the head tags and the body tags, just to have a basic page. Okay, and I will put a page title in here as well. This is my closing head tag. And in between the head tags is where the title goes. So my title tag. This should all be review at this point. And I'll just call it div demo and close that off. Check my spelling. There we go. And I should save that. Alright, so my page now has a title. No visible content on the page yet, so let's create our body tags. Okay, and the closing body tag / body. Okay, and in between there is where all my content's going to go. So I'm just going to create some div tags. So it's DIV at its most basic, and I'll create a closing div tag over here /div, and I'll just put some text in between there. I'll say this is text content inside a div tag. Okay, and save that. And we'll take a quick look at that. So let me just toggle out to my desktop here. And again, I can just preview my HTML file by double-clicking it in the browser, and it will launch your default browser, and we can have a peek at that. So there you can see is my content, and it's hard to know it's in a div tag right now by how it's presented. Later on we can make that more obvious with some CSS styles, but just look up here, and it's hard to see the tab, but it does say div demo if there was enough room to read that. Okay, so let's go back, and I'll add a couple of images to the page. Now the way the div tag lays out, and really layout is a big feature of why we would use div tags, is that in its fundamental setup, they just stack on top of each other vertically inside of the browser. So let me go over to my text editor here, and I'll add a second div tag. Now I cheated here. I actually copied the code that I'd previously done when trying this out for my images. So let me paste that in. Oh, looks like I lost that. So I'll do it the long way. I thought I could make a shortcut there. So I'll just type it out. Div Oops, let me just get this correct here. Div, okay, and we'll put an image. So I'm going to create an image tag. Now the image tag doesn't need a closing tag. Image, and then it's source src equals quote marks, and I need to put the pathway in. So if you don't know it off by heart, just go out to your directory and see the pathway. I can see I have a folder called images, and inside of that folder I've got the file. I'll do the Canadian cheddar first, so I will actually copy that name and put it on the pathway in my code. So source equals images is the folder name, then slash, and then the file name, which I copied, so I'll paste that there. Close the quote marks, and just close that image tag, and then close the div tag. So slash div, close that, and save that, and let's see what we get in our browser. So now I have two div tags. I have the first one that you saw with the text. I've just put an image nested inside of the second set of div tags. So let's go to my browser here. I'll refresh the screen, and lo and behold, there's the content of the first div tag, there's the content of the second div tag, and they are stacked. So just to reinforce this stacking feature, I'm going to introduce one more photo in a div tag. And at this point I can cheat a little bit by copying that line and just coming below here and pasting it, and just changing the name of the file in the pathway. And I'll just confirm that out here. It's called 2dogs.jpg. And really the best way to do this is to copy file names. I'm just doing this on my keyboard copy, just to prevent spelling errors and typos, because the links won't work unless the spelling is perfect. And I will replace this file name with the one I just copied. Save my file, and we'll check that out in the browser. So I'll just toggle over to my browser here, refresh the browser, and there you have it. So there's the three elements stacked on top of each other. The text contained inside of the first div tag, the cookie box image inside of the second div tag, and the two dogs inside of the third div tag. Now with some CSS, we can actually float these around the page and position them anywhere we want to. We can make them what are called absolute, which is like basically pinning it to the page in an exact location based on its X and Y coordinates. Or we can actually put them on the page and have them relative to containers. So we can nest div tags inside of other div tags, as well as nest them inside of tables, and so on. All right, but that's the basic right there on how to create a div tag and how to expect it to lay out on your page when you create it in HTML. So once again, they do stack in order, and if I leave some space in between here, you can see that I have three div tags inside of my body tags. One of them has some text content, and I guess to formalize this, maybe I'll make it an H1. So I'll surround this, I'll nest this inside of some H1 tags here. Let me make this 1 and not I, and a closing H1 inside of the div tag. Just get my slash in there, H1. Okay, save that, and we'll just update, refresh my web page. Okay, so there you have it. Three div tags, and they do stack. That is how they form naturally in HTML, but we can influence their locations by going to a CSS file and linking it to the page and applying the appropriate attributes. So that's your basic lesson on div tags. I will follow up with how to create more complexity using CSS. Now let's take these three div tag elements and relocate them on the page, and we're going to need to do that using CSS. So I'm just going to go out and create a new CSS file right now. I'm going to go to my text editor here and create a new file, and I'll just do a save right away, and I'll just call it, I want to put it inside of my CSS folder, and I will call it div underscore demo.css. Click save and use .css, yes, and there is the file. It's blank right now, but it does exist. If I go out to the directory, I can demonstrate that right there. It's inside of the CSS folder. Okay, so let's go back to my text edit. Now for these three elements, we're going to use the ID method, which is like a class, but ID means that you can only apply it once per HTML page, because typically with layout applications on div tags, the boxes tend to be used as templates, so we use a standard name per page, and it's one per page, if you will. So I'm just going to start by using the hashtag, and that's how we declare it as an ID. Hashtag, and again, let me just make this much bigger here. Hashtag, and I'll call one left absolute. That will be the name of the tag, or of the ID rather, sorry, and then we'll put in our curly braces. And I do have a finished one here, so I'm going to use it as a reference. Let me just call that up, and it is from your assignment file. Let me just move this over here, and I'm going to use the left box as the example here. So I'll use the same features. So we'll throw a border around it. Border. I might not put the border on the photos, but for the text, why not? Border, colon, and the shortcut is for the size. I'm just going to do 4px and then space, solid, and we'll just use our basic red color and semicolon. Okay, that will give us a red solid border, 4 pixels wide. The next one is important. It's the location of where this div tag will sit on our page. And we're going to use, there are different types of positions. That position is the property that we're going to use here. Position, but the type we're going to use is called absolute. And that's why I named the ID left absolute. Okay, and you do need to spell it correctly. And again, what that means is, again, it's like putting a pin in this div tag on the page, and it will not float. It will be absolutely stuck to that location. So now we will determine its size and location. So I'm going to say height. I don't have to put these in, but for the actually for the border it helps. Height, let's say 200 pixels. So I'll use the pixel as the unit of measurement, and here again there are various units of measurement that we could apply. Okay, and I'll say the top of the box will be 50 pixels down. So colon, 50 pixels, semicolon. So that means that this will always sit 50 pixels from the top. And for width for the box, actually I'm going to put that here, it just makes more sense. Width, it doesn't really matter where it is in the stacking order for this, but I like it to be a little organized. Let's say the width will be, we can use percentages or we can use pixels. I think I'll just go with 300 px for that. If it's too big, I can come and change it in the style sheet. Okay, and so we said top. Let's go back down here, left. I'm just going to say maybe also 50 pixels. Oh, let's keep it close. I'll make it 20 pixels from the left. So really it has two references, the top and left. And those are most often what you would use as a reference point, because all web pages start from 0, 0 in the top left corner. So this would be over by 20, down by 50. Okay, so let's, yeah, I'll throw in a background color, I guess. Background dash color, whoops, color, colon. Let me fix that, it needs to be color like the American spelling. Background color. I do have a hexadecimal number here, so I'm just going to use it. hash mark 72DB1B semicolon. You could type in green, red, purple, yellow, anything like that. Those would work as well. And then I think we'll leave it at that. I'm not going to bother with the z-index for this. Z-index is the stacking order. But let me just save this. And we'll go into our HTML file now and we'll link to this style sheet. And then we'll apply this ID to the div tag that's holding the text. So let me just toggle over to the other file here. Now the link to the CSS should be inside of the head, and it is a link tag, link space, and it's same as linking to a web page, href colon and the pathway inside of quote marks. The pathway is a folder called CSS, and I believe I called this, well, let me go and check before just taking a guess here. Div demo, yeah, and I'm going to copy that. Copy that, come back to my file here, paste that file name in there. Now it was .css, it happens to be hidden on my Mac. Just a setting I have it set on right now. But that is the actual file name and the pathway. So let me just close that off. I can do it with a slash there because the link tag again doesn't need a closing tag. Oh, you know what? I actually have to put in a couple more properties. rel equals absolute, rather spreadsheet. Okay, and then let me just cheat on this one here as well. If I go to my HTML file, which I have over here, here's the link right here. rel equals style sheet, sorry, not spreadsheet. Let me just copy this in. Yeah, my memory of the syntax isn't so great. There we go. And I'll just paste over that and do it correctly. So rel equals style sheet inside of quote marks, and then we must also include the type equals text / CSS. All right, I know that's correct now. Let me just save that. Okay, so here's our link to our CSS file. Again, it's contained inside of the head tags. The properties href, this should be equals, not a colon. Save that again. Href equals quote marks the pathway. So I have it inside of the CSS folder. It's called div_demo.css. Then we need to put in these other two attributes, the rel attribute equals style sheet, and the type attribute, and that would be type. Let me just fix that quote mark as well. A lot of little typos here. Save. And that is my link. Now I need to apply the ID to a div tag, so I'm going to go into this first div, leave a space, ID equals, and we name this one left absolute. And I will just double check that in my CSS file, but I believe that's the case. Close the quote marks. And let's make sure I spelled it correctly there, left absolute. Okay, just save that, and I will just confirm that in my spreadsheet. Yes, left absolute. All right, so if I go to my web page now, yeah, let me hide these again here so there's not so much confusion. If I go to my web page, update it, now it's sitting in its own box, and it's 50 pixels from the top, 20 pixels from the left. You'll notice too that it's now actually overlapping. It sort of creates a new stacking order, if you will. Once we have a style attached to it, it floats above the basic HTML layout. So that's why you can see this box behind. So we're going to push this over here by creating a style for it, and then we'll push this one over to the far right as well. And we're just going to do that by keeping it consistent, 50 pixels from the top, and just, you know, push it over from the left even farther. So I believe this is 300 pixels wide plus 20, that's 320. So it has to be above 320 for the left for the cookie box. So let's go in here, and I'm going to do some copying and pasting now for the style sheet. And I'll just copy this whole style, which is an ID, and come down here and paste it in. And I'll call this middle absolute. And I think I'll get rid of the border. And we won't put a height or width in. We'll let the content dictate that. But I'll leave the top and left, and we'll even get rid of the background color. So I've eliminated a lot of particulars. The only thing that's going to happen is that that image, once we apply this to the div tag that contains the image, will locate itself 50 pixels from the top. And now let's change this. It has to be more than 320. So let's say 350. 350. Now I happen to know, and you need to do a little math in your head, I guess. I happen to know the image is 250 pixels wide. So the next one over will have to be this plus at least 250. But let's just save this and apply this in our HTML page. So this is the CSS. Here's my HTML. And I'll come into this div tag and add an ID. ID equals quote marks, middle, absolute, close quote marks. Just check that that's spelled correctly, which it's not. If it's not matching correctly, it won't work, of course. Absolute. There we go. And I'll just save that. Okay, so middle absolute ID has been applied to what is the picture of the cookie box. So let's go and refresh our browser and see what we get here. Drum roll, please. There we go. So these two items now are floating above anything that doesn't have a div tag that has no CSS. And you can see how there's a stacking order. This is where that ultimately that Z index could come into play. But I'm just going to move this over even farther to the right of the cookies. And that will be the end of the demo. So let's go back to our text editor, and we'll add one more ID style here. I'll actually copy this one and just paste it over here, and we'll call this right absolute. Right absolute, position absolute, top 50 left. Remember I said the image was 250, so it has to be at least this plus 250, which is 600. So I'm going to push it even further, and I'll say 750. If I find that's too much, I can always pull it back and bring this number down. But let's just save that. And we'll apply that ID to the third div tag on the page, which is the picture of the two dogs. So ID equals, quote marks, right absolute. And again, it does need to be matching perfectly with the name. And also, it is case sensitive. If I had used an uppercase letter in here, that would have mattered. Absolute. Okay, that looks correct now. Let me save that file and go back to my browser and refresh the browser, and there we go. It is a little bit farther, so just to demonstrate, I can change that. Let's go in here to the CSS style sheet, and let's just say 720. Save that. Go back to my browser, refresh, and you see how that pulled it over. I probably could have got away with 7, so let me make the final refinement here. 700. Save that. Go to my browser, update one more time, and there we go. So that's how we can actually control layouts using cascading style sheets in combination with div tags. And that's how we apply CSS to HTML, again, to create some layout using the div tags. Let me just go back to my code view here, and let you see that right here. Okay, there we have it.